Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli occupation's longest-serving prime minister, having served for more than 17 years. Accused of bribery, fraud, and breach of trust, Netanyahu's trial has gripped Israel and the world. Is he a leader fighting for his nation, or a man clinging to power to avoid justice? This is the story of the Netanyahu trial, a saga of corruption allegations, political maneuvering, and a nation divided. But to understand the trial, we need to know the man. Benjamin Netanyahu, often called Bibi, has been a dominant force in Israeli politics for over 3 decades. He served as prime minister in 3 separate stints: 1996 to 1999, 2009 to 2021, and again from 2022 till now. But his career has long been shadowed by whispers of corruption, from influence peddling in the 90s to lavish gifts from billionaires. Allegations have followed him like a storm cloud, yet time and time again, he's emerged unscathed, until now. In 2019, Netanyahu became the first sitting Israeli prime minister to be formally indicted. The charges: bribery, fraud, and breach of trust. These accusations stem from 3 intertwined cases known as Case 1000, Case 2000, and Case 4000. Let's break them down. Picture this. From 2007 to 2016, Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's prime minister, is allegedly showered with nearly $300,000 in luxury gifts. We're talking boxes of hand-rolled Cuban cigars, crates of vintage champagne, and sparkling jewelry. These aren't your average thank you gifts. They're the kind of opulence you'd expect in a Hollywood blockbuster. And speaking of Hollywood, the man behind many of these gifts is none other than Arnon Milchan, an Israeli movie producer behind hits like 12 Years a Slave, Fight Club, and Pretty Woman, as well as Australian billionaire James Packer, a casino magnate with a fortune to burn. But here's where it gets juicy. Prosecutors say these weren't just friendly gestures. They allege Netanyahu used his power as prime minister to pull strings for Milchan. So what did Netanyahu supposedly do for Milchan? First, prosecutors claim he leaned on Israel's finance ministry to double a tax exemption for expatriate Israelis returning home. Why does this matter? Because Milchan, an Israeli who'd spent years abroad, stood to save millions if the exemption was extended. But it doesn't stop there. The indictment says Netanyahu went international, lobbying the US government to help Milchan renew his American visa. This wasn't just a phone call. It was the leader of a nation allegedly using his diplomatic clout to help a Hollywood mogul stay in the US. And there's more. Prosecutors allege Netanyahu meddled in a merger deal involving a television channel partly owned by Milchan, potentially boosting its value. These aren't small favors. These are moves that could reshape fortunes. Now, what about James Packer, the Australian billionaire? Interestingly, he is not accused of getting anything in return for his gifts. It seems Packer was just along for the ride, sending luxury goods to the Netanyahus without an explicit favor tied to it. Netanyahu, Milchan, and Packer all deny any wrongdoing. Netanyahu's team insists the gifts were just tokens of friendship between old pals, no strings attached. Milchan and Packer, they're not even on trial, walking free while the spotlight burns on Netanyahu. And then there's Sarah Netanyahu, the prime minister's wife, who allegedly received some of these lavish gifts too. Yet like Milchan and Packer, she's not a defendant. Meet Arnon Moses, the kingpin of Israeli media. As the publisher and controlling owner of Yedioth Ahronot, one of Israel's most influential newspapers, Moses wields the power to shape public opinion. Now enter Benjamin Netanyahu, a man who thrives on public image but faces a problem. Yedioth Ahronot often paints him and his family in an unflattering light. Enter Case 2000, where these 2 titans allegedly struck a deal that could shake the foundations of Israeli democracy. Prosecutors allege that in a series of covert meetings, Moses offered Netanyahu a golden ticket, a dramatic shift in how Yedioth Ahronot would cover him, glowing headlines for Netanyahu and his family, with his political rivals dragged through the mud. In exchange, Netanyahu would use his power as prime minister to push legislation that would kneecap Israel Hayom, a rival newspaper backed by Netanyahu's ally billionaire Sheldon Adelson. A calculated move to hand Moses' empire a financial windfall by limiting his competition. Moses on trial denied any wrongdoing. Let's set the stage for case 4000. Shaul Elovitch, a telecom mogul who once ruled Bezek, Israel's telecom giant, and its satellite TV arm. His wife Iris also controlled Walla, a news website with millions of readers. From 2012 to 2017, prosecutors allege these three struck a deal so brazen it could topple them all. Elovitch would let Netanyahu shape Walla's coverage, and in return, Netanyahu would protect Elovitch's empire. This wasn't about a few friendly headlines. Prosecutors say the Elovitches handed Netanyahu and his family a megaphone, letting them dictate what Walla published. Praise for the prime minister, silence on his scandals, and hits on his rivals. In exchange, Netanyahu allegedly ensured Elovitch's business interests sailed smoothly. What most people don't know is that there were two other cases submitted against Bibi, but they did not go to trial. Cases 1270 and 3000. Picture this. It's the mid-2010s, and Netanyahu's wife, Sarah, is under investigation for alleged misuse of public funds. Prosecutors allege that Netanyahu's former media advisor, Nir Hefetz, made Ila Gerstel, the president of Israel's district court, an offer she couldn't ignore: the coveted role of Attorney General of Israel. The catch is that Gerstel would need to close the case against Sarah Netanyahu. This wasn't a casual suggestion, it was a high-stakes proposition. If true, it echoed a scandal from Netanyahu's first term as prime minister in 1997. By 2019, case 1270 was closed for lack of evidence. Now, case 3000 centers on Israel's purchase of 3 Dolphin-class submarines and 4 SAR-6-class corvettes from the German company ThyssenKrupp, a deal worth billions. The suggestion was that the deal was rigged to favor ThyssenKrupp, with personal gains for those pulling the strings. At the heart of it was David Shimron, Netanyahu's cousin and personal lawyer, who also happened to represent ThyssenKrupp in Israel. What could happen if Netanyahu is convicted? If convicted of bribery, he could face up to 10 years in prison, a significant fine, or both. The charges of fraud and breach of trust carry a lighter penalty, up to 3 years behind bars. But what would that mean for Netanyahu's political future? Under Israeli law, a sitting prime minister cannot be removed from office unless convicted. That means Netanyahu can continue to serve even while on trial, until a verdict is reached. Even then, the story wouldn't end there. Both Netanyahu and the state have the right to appeal the ruling. If they do, the case would move up to Israel's Supreme Court, dragging out the legal process even further and delaying any final resolution. Netanyahu's current legal troubles may be the most serious yet, but they're far from his first. His complicated relationship with the law began as early as 1997, during his first term as Israel's prime minister. That year, Israeli police recommended that Netanyahu be indicted on corruption charges, accusing him of influence peddling. Specifically, he was suspected of trying to appoint an attorney general who would ease legal pressure on him by dropping or reducing charges in another case. But in the end, prosecutors ruled that there simply wasn't enough evidence to justify putting him on trial. The case was dropped, but the suspicion lingered. Just 2 years later, in 1999, another scandal emerged. This time, Netanyahu was accused of accepting over $100,000 in free services, including renovations and other perks, from a government contractor. Once again, police believed there was enough cause for prosecution and recommended charges, but the Attorney General declined to move forward, citing serious difficulties in proving the case in court. Netanyahu left office soon after, but the accusations continued to follow him. For the next decade, Netanyahu focused on rebuilding his political career, ultimately returning to power in 2009, but the pattern would repeat itself. In 2018, things escalated. After years of investigations into alleged favors, gifts, and backdoor deals involving wealthy businessmen and media moguls, Israeli police formally recommended that Netanyahu be prosecuted for bribery, fraud, and breach of trust in 3 separate cases, now known as cases 1000, 2000, and 4000. In 2019, Israel's Attorney General agreed. Netanyahu became the first sitting prime minister in Israeli history to be indicted while in office. His trial began in 2020 and has moved slowly ever since. delayed by political instability, COVID-19 disruptions, and endless legal wrangling. Throughout it all, Netanyahu has maintained his innocence and pleaded not guilty. He's described the entire case as a politically motivated witch hunt, accusing prosecutors and the media of trying to oust him from power through legal means rather than elections. Then, in 2024, the legal pressure intensified on the global stage. The International Court of Justice issued an arrest warrant for Netanyahu in connection with war crimes committed during the war on Gaza. From the very start, Netanyahu's legal team has been accused of pulling every trick in the book to slow down the trial. The defense has repeatedly requested postponements, citing everything from scheduling conflicts to the need for more time to prepare. In 2021, a key witness's personal reasons caused a delay. Later that year, COVID-19 restrictions stalled proceedings. In 2022, the trial was paused again when a judge tested positive for the virus. Some legal analysts argue that these were deliberate stalling tactics by the defense, who've been criticized for prolonging cross-examinations and overwhelming the court with motions. One source close to the defense denied this, blaming the prosecution for calling too many witnesses, but the pattern of delays is hard to ignore. Critics argue he's used Israel's frequent crises to push his trial to the back burner. The COVID-19 pandemic in 2020 gave him an early excuse to delay the trial's start, but it's the wars in Gaza, Lebanon, and Syria that have been his biggest shield. Since Hamas's operation on October 7, 2023, Netanyahu has cited national security concerns to request multiple postponements. On March 18, 2025, for example, he was scheduled to testify but got a reprieve when Israel launched a surprise attack on Gaza, effectively pushing the trial. Critics, including opposition leader Yair Lapid, have accused him of prolonging the war to avoid accountability, not just for the trial, but for his government's failure during the October 7 attack. Perhaps Netanyahu's boldest move has been his push to reshape Israel's judicial system itself. In 2023, his far-right coalition launched a controversial judicial overhaul to limit the power of the courts and give the government more control over judicial appointments. Critics, including thousands of protesters who flooded the streets, saw this as a direct attempt to undermine the trial by weakening the judiciary. Netanyahu, bound by a 2020 conflict of interest agreement, couldn't personally intervene in these reforms, but his allies like far-right ministers Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich carried the torch. The overhaul sparked a national crisis, with some arguing it was designed to create an escape route for Netanyahu if convicted. This move didn't just threaten the trial, it divided Israel itself. For Netanyahu's supporters, the overhaul was about reining in an overreaching judiciary. For his critics, it was a power grab by a man desperate to avoid jail. The plan stalled after the October 7 attacks, but the message was clear. Netanyahu was willing to reshape the system to protect himself. Netanyahu hasn't just played defense, he's tried to negotiate his way out. In 2022 and again in 2025, reports surfaced of secret plea bargain talks mediated by former Supreme Court President Aaron Barak. The deal: Netanyahu would plead guilty to a lesser charge in Case 1000, the luxury gifts scandal, in exchange for dropping the bribery charges. But there was a catch. Netanyahu refused to accept a finding of moral turpitude, which would ban him from public office for 7 years, or to step down as prime minister. When Barak insisted on resignation, the talks collapsed. And then there's the international card. In June 2025, US President Donald Trump made headlines by calling Netanyahu's trial a witch hunt, and demanded it be cancelled or that Netanyahu be pardoned. Netanyahu quickly thanked Trump, fueling speculation of coordination. Israeli opposition leaders like Yair Lapid cried foul, accusing Trump of meddling in Israel's judiciary system. Some even suggested Netanyahu was leveraging US support to pressure Israel's attorney general or court. As Netanyahu's trial grinds on, one thing is clear: this isn't just a legal battle. It's a test of how far a sitting leader can go to shield himself from accountability. For years, Netanyahu has used every tool at his disposal to delay, distract, and discredit the process. He's exploited national emergencies, pushed judicial reforms that would weaken the very system meant to hold him accountable, and refused any deal that would require him to step down. even temporarily. Instead of facing the charges head-on, he's tried to outlast them. He's turned the courtroom into a political stage, framing the trial as a conspiracy while consolidating power through a network of loyalists and far-right allies. The future of this trial remains uncertain. Appeals could stretch it out for years, but the damage has already been done. Institutions have been undermined, public trust eroded, and legal accountability treated as optional. Whether Netanyahu is convicted or not, the deeper question is this: what happens when a leader is allowed to treat the law as negotiable, when staying in office becomes a legal defense strategy, not a public duty?